Welcome back to Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro, a podcast all about the Bible, theology, and all things pertaining to the Christian faith.
Yes,
I'm the Ryan half, and you are...
Brian. The Brian half.
The Brian half.
While. We're back in the saddle, and it's.
We are back in the saddle, and it has been...
Our timing is off.
Our timing is way off. It's been some time, hasn't it, Brian?
It has been. It has been. You've been doing some classwork. I've been doing some classwork. We've been classing it up. Classing
it up. Yeah. And my fall was a little bit of a topsy-turvy time for things.
Almost as bad as Adam's, so.
Almost.
Little theology joke there.
Yes.
Yeah. So we just took some unintended time off. We usually take January off. We're not going to do that. We're going to try to come back and
we kind of did already. We took a couple months off there.
Fair point.
But you were busy writing papers. I'm in a couple classes right now, and so we're just finding our way back to it. And so I think even as we kind of get this set up, you and I have kind of talked. Like right now, I'm in 2 classes. You're writing a paper. I think until maybe the summer, I think we're planning on just doing every other week. So
I've got
want to set that expectation. Yeah, you've got travel. So we're going to try to do every other week here. Just we want to be consistent, but also realizing what time we got in our lives right now. So anyway, but we're back and we're wrapping up or finishing something we started in September. I don't know. The last time we recorded it's been some months ago, but we're talking about the Beatitudes again.
Right.
And we've heard I've heard some good things about the first one. I just had a comment the other day that someone really appreciated it.
Here we are with the second half. So it's interesting because I was doing this kind of, in our adult Sunday school, we're going through the Sermon on the Mount. And so I was like, oh, this will be, I can kind of take some of the things that I don't have a chance to talk about there and spend a little more time in. But now we finished it up last week, actually. So here we go. So,
it happens,
It happens. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so just to review, the first 4 Beatitudes, I kind of suggested have a connection, and they kind of, and there's. I'll be honest here. There's I'm always honest, but there's,
thank you.
Always, but what I'm saying, when I'm on this podcast, I try to be as straightforward.
We try to be just
the idea though is that there's kind of many people think there's a development. My point is that a lot of people divide the Beatitudes up in different ways, but one of the ways that I think makes a lot of sense is that the first 4 focus on our relationship with God. And if you look at this, like the poor in spirit, we talked about, this is kind of being in a status where you recognize your need for God. You mourn, you recognize how far you've fallen. It's not just mourning like we normally think of, but probably mourning sin and that kind of thing. Meek is our response then to that. And then hunger and thirsting for righteousness is our desire. So you almost see like a progression here of someone moving from recognizing their abject dependence upon God to being a person who really hungers and thirsts after righteousness. I want to go back because it's been so long, at least for us, again, podcast time's weird because you just mentioned somebody just listened to this the other day, but I just want to remind you, I kind of see, and there's again, different ways to look at the Sermon on the Mount as a whole, but really Jesus, I think, is talking about here what it means to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. What is it like? Kingdom of heaven is one of the repeated things we're going to talk about. I think kind of one of the high points, and I don't mean, how do I want to say this? One of the major points that Jesus is making in the sermon is when we get to this point, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And so I think that's kind of a high, kind of the point of the sermon as a whole. He's talking about what it means to be people who are citizens of God's kingdom, who are becoming fitted for or suited for God's kingdom. And so those first 4, if I was going to summarize them, and this is something that Jesus says when he talks about when he's asked, what is the greatest commandment, right? He says, the first is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Second is like it, he says, love your neighbor as yourself. A lot of churches summarize that, love God, love people, right? That's kind of just the shorthand way to say this. And I think the first 4 Beatitudes, and I think the last 4 kind of break down into that category as well. The first 4 have to do with our attitude toward God, our posture toward God,
Right.
recognizing his need, our need for him, and hungering and thirsting for his righteousness. So these last four we're going to talk about, these last four Beatitudes, are really about our posture toward other people. How do we, as citizens of God's kingdom, how do we treat others is essentially the way I would put this. So that's kind of to give you the overview of what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about those last four. Anything you want to say before we move on? Or
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
I really appreciate this. I mean, I appreciated this when we did this before, but to kind of look at these in that way, because I think sometimes they can take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
And so, to kind of to have a framework to look at these and to understand what does it mean to mourn? What are we to mourn in the context of this? And so I'm really excited about us kind of continuing this and where we're going with it.
Yeah. And I'll repeat this again. The Sermon on the Mount is probably some of the most familiar material in the entire New Testament. I mean, there are parts of this that are, maybe John 3:16, right, is more just familiar in the culture as a whole. But other than that, so many of the passages we quote, so many passages we know are from the Sermon on the Mount. And familiarity sometimes can cause us not to think carefully about what we're looking at. We just think, oh, well, I know what this means, right? I've known this since I was a child. But we don't necessarily upgrade our understanding as we mature in our faith as well, I would say. So let's go ahead and read Matthew 5:7 for me. If you have it, I didn't ask you to get it, so I just assumed you had it there. So
I've memorized it. I've got it in the back of my head. Here we go. Matthew 5:7. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy.
So the idea of mercy is the way we act toward someone who has need, right? It's acting towards someone in a merciful way means that we recognize their need and we're treating them in a way that is commiserate with that need. And so what's really interesting here is this idea of blessed are the merciful. Oftentimes we think about the way that God gives mercy, and we talk about God being a merciful God, right? And he acts toward us in mercy is usually the way that we think about it. But here it's very interesting that Jesus connects our receiving mercy with our ability to give mercy. And there's a couple things that come to mind in this. The first is just I'll quote a Rich Mullins song. It's "The Love of God." That song begins with a line that I think about a lot. Rich wrote, "There's a wideness in God's mercy I cannot find in my own," and I think about that a lot because I think we tend to. How do I say this? We tend to look at people and we're not very merciful, right? The confession I always make is about my tendency toward road rage. I don't act mercifully toward those who cut me off in traffic.
Listen,
right?
most people are terrible drivers. We just know this. So it's a known thing.
But me, I go
exactly.
I go the exact right speed, which is just slightly over the speed limit.
Yes.
People who are going slower than that are idiots, and the people who go faster than that are idiots. It's only people who go exactly my speed. But anyway, the idea is, when we think about the way we act toward others, and of course, traffic is for the most part a silly thing. I mean, it can get pretty serious, but it's pretty much a silly thing. But even in the way we treat others when we've been wronged, perhaps by them, or when we think, well, they're just getting what they deserve, or we tend to look at others who are different than we are. We tend not to have that kind of mercy. So that line, there's a wideness in God's mercy I cannot find in my own, brings me back to think about how does God, if I'm wanting to be conformed to the image of the Son, who is the likeness of the unseen God, how do I want my mercy to be? How do I want to be toward others? And so that line, but then I also think about this parable of the unmerciful servant. Do you remember that story?
Oh, yeah.
That parable that Jesus told? You want to summarize it, or?
So there's a servant who owes something, and he does
amount.
a great amount, and he does some paperwork and gets some stuff done. And it's
Well,
like,
you're talking about the unjust steward, but
oh, I'm sorry
talking about the unmerciful. That's fine. That's fine. I'll go ahead and tell it. I put you on the spot. I always do that. It's
Yeah.
just I don't know if you remember, but it's been so long since we've done this. I always put you on the spot.
Yes, I do. It's a PTSD. Yes.
Unmerciful servant owes a huge amount, more than he could ever repay. And he goes and he pleads for mercy in front of the one he owes. And he's granted mercy. In other words, instead of throwing him into debtor's prison, his debt is just forgiven. And then he goes out and he finds another servant, a fellow servant, who owes him a small amount. And the numbers are just ridiculous. I didn't look them up before this, but it's like he owes millions of dollars, an amount he could never repay. This other servant owes him just a small amount. And he will not forgive him. He does not act mercifully toward this servant, and so when the one who's forgiven him much finds out about it, that he's unwilling to forgive himself, then he retracts his mercy essentially. So it makes me think about this in Matthew 5:7, where it says that. Blessed are the merciful. I remind you again, that word blessed is kind of our repeated word here. Happy are, or pleasant are, in a pleasant situation, are those who are merciful toward others, because they will be shown mercy themselves. That the measure that we use in order to show mercy to others is the mercy that we will ourselves receive. And that unmerciful servant, I think, is a really great illustration of that. Any thoughts on that? Anything you want to say?
I don't think so. I mean, I think so. This is kind of, again, this is about God, and then now this is where in this part of this, you see this kind of just as the outward expression to one another. Then
I think so, yeah. And of course, it's based on same as here. The mercy that we receive from God is what allows us to be merciful toward others. But it's more about our connection with the people around us is what I think. So the second one here is blessed are the pure in heart. There's another, not to quote Rich Mullins all day today, but there's another Rich Mullins song called "One Thing," and it has a repeated refrain, basically saying we want to focus upon the one thing. The pure in heart will see God, and that's the promise here. Verse 8 says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." To see God, of course, is to be in a state of blessing. The tradition within Judaism is to, we see this in the Old Testament, we see it referred to in the New Testament, that to see God is, no one can see God and live, is kind of the way you see it expressed. But the idea of being pure in heart puts us in a position where we're able to come into the presence of God and to see him face to face, as we're promised in the age to come that we will be. And the same as it was in the beginning, that in the beginning we could see God as well. There's a psalm, and I think I have it up here. Yeah, here it is, Psalm 24. And I'm just going to read this because it has a similar it helps us understand pure in heart, what's being thought about here. This is Psalm 24, verses 3 through 6. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? This is a psalm of David, by the way. So ascending the mountain of the Lord, of course, is the idea of going up to the temple, right? Going up Mount Zion, going up to worship is the idea. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not trust in an idol or swear by a false god. So the idea of clean hands is that you've not used your hands, ceremonial cleansing, of course, is something that took place, but it's also that you've not used your hands in order to do evil, right? To harm someone. There's a similar passage where it talks about, Peter talks about lifting up clean hands, right? When we're lifting up our hands in prayer to God, they should not have been used. Those same hands should not have been used to harm someone else or to do evil towards someone else. So the idea of clean hands and a pure heart kind of go together. That we are, we have a purity of heart that allows us to come into the worship, into the presence of God, and to worship Him. So it's interesting, in Psalm, it's the idea of coming into God's presence in worship, which, as I've said before, is in the Old Testament. That idea of drawing near to God is the way we find worship described more than any other. So to come into God's presence, we need to make sure that our hands are clean and our heart is pure. Is the idea.
Okay.
Let's go to the next one, unless you have other thoughts on that.
I don't think I have any other. No, I don't think it's just pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I guess so. Here's another. I find this one really interesting, though. And when you say straightforward, this one is probably one that gets quoted a ton, right? But I think there's some things for us to think about here. So verse 9, go ahead and read Matthew 5:9 for me, if you would.
Yeah. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
So peacemaker, I think the emphasis here is on the idea of ones who make peace, right? And the interesting thing is, of course, peace can be seen as a very passive concept, a very passive idea. But that's not the way peace is portrayed in Scripture, I don't think. The first thing we have in the Old Testament is, as we've talked about this before, we have this Hebrew word shalom, which is kind of the greeting, right? That Hebrew people would make toward one another. And what you're doing is you're wishing peace. You're hoping for peace for the person that you're pronouncing that to, right? You're speaking kind of peace over them. But peace is really something that is not passive in Scripture. It's something that's active. But anyway, shalom, I should say, is this idea of peace is more than, as I've said before, we sometimes think about peace as the absence, but I think the Bible suggests that peace is the real thing, right? Not Coke, but it is peace is the real thing. That shalom sometimes or peace we think of as an absence of conflict. So if I can just stay in a situation where I'm not experiencing conflict, then I'm experiencing peace. So an absence of war, an absence of arguing, an absence of fighting with others. I would say it's the opposite way around. That shalom is the true life that we've been given. The peace is the true life that we've been given. This is what it means to live. When you think about living at peace with one another, this is the kind of community that God wants within His kingdom.
So I mean, it's kind of this idea that we can have no conflict, but that doesn't mean that we're living in true peace.
Like a shalom kind of life.
Like kingdom peace.
Yeah. Right. So there's the passages that I really like to think about with this. And one of them, I'm going to actually read one out of Isaiah and then a couple out of Jeremiah in just a minute. But listen to this in Isaiah. This is Isaiah 32, 17 through 18. Because the other part of this, so we talked about what it is, that the peace is this real thing. It's not an absence of conflict, right? But it is the kind of life where you are, how do I say this, at peace with God, at peace with one another. It's living a I'm not thinking of the good word here, but almost like the abundant life that Christ talks about, or what I can't think of the exact word I'm trying to think, but a life that is truly life, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'll try to think of the word I'm looking for in a minute. But verses 17, this is Isaiah 32, 17 through 18. The fruit of that righteousness will be peace. So think about that. He's talking about living in righteousness, being a righteous person, not being someone who's going to cheat another, not someone who's going to cause conflict within a community, but living a righteous life, living before God in the way that we're supposed to live. And he says the fruit of that righteousness will be peace. So that helps us kind of understand what I'm talking about here. When we're living in a way that we're keeping God's word, we're not living in conflict with His will for us, then that results in peace. So the fruit of that righteousness will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever. And that kind of describes that peaceful life that I'm talking about, quietness and confidence. My people will live in peaceful dwelling places, in secure homes, in undisturbed places of rest. And I think all of that kind of describes what we're talking about, a community of people who are able to be undisturbed, who are able to live quiet lives. One of the words that's used in the New Testament for this idea, it's not peace. The New Testament word for peace is irene, but there's another word that I've talked about before, hesukia, which has to do with this idea of quietness, living a life. It doesn't mean that there's not things going on around us, but it means that within ourselves we have this confidence and we have this stillness within us. Now, 1 Peter, can you look up 1 Peter 3:8-12 for me real quick? I have it here. And then I'll go ahead and read these Jeremiah passages in just a minute that I want to spend some time on. So again, this is, and here's where we're talking about peacemaking. It's not just, peace isn't just something that happens, right? It's something that has to be worked toward, is what I'm trying to say here. Okay, go ahead.
All right, this is 1 Peter 3:8-12. Finally, all of you be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing. Because of this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil.
So we see again that connection between righteousness and peace, living a righteous life and living a peaceful life. But what I'm really struck by there in 1 Peter, which this is an Old Testament, this is a Psalm quotation as well. But Peter says there, quoting the Old Testament, we need to seek peace and pursue it. And that when I first read that, that's the thing that really made me kind of think, peace is not a passive idea. It's not something that we just, if we set back, peace will naturally happen. It's something that has to be sought. It's something we seek. And we talked, I mentioned already this idea of seeking God's kingdom. It's an active pursuit, but he says seek peace and pursue it. And that almost seems contradictory given our idea or understanding of peace, but peace is something that has to be pursued. It's something that we work on. It's something that we work toward. Now, the rest of that passage you read, did you notice? Of course, he's contrasting evil doing, and evildoers and righteousness. Do you notice anything? What struck you there as you were reading that? As you're the one who was reading that for us?
I mean, it's an inversion.
Okay.
That's the only thing. That's I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to point me towards here, Brian.
I'm not trying to point you toward anything. I was just asking if there was anything that you noticed. He says, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another. So again, this is a community kind of pursuit. It's something that as people, I'm not trying to send you with anything, but repaying evil with evil is interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this as well, when we talk about the idea of turning the other cheek. The common way we would probably react in our lives, again, if I'm cut off in traffic, I want to go up and cut them off before the next stop. Right. I want to repay evil with evil. But he says instead, on the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because this is what you are called to, that you may inherit a blessing. So again, it's like that being merciful and receiving mercy. When we're the ones who are giving blessing, we are the ones who receive blessing as well. So I think, I don't know, I just wondered if there was anything that you noticed. He talks about the way that we speak.
I guess one of the things that just kind of, as you had that conversation, it's not like if evil is done to you, then it's a foregone conclusion. Evil is going to happen to you, and this is how you repay it. And so I think that's in one of those things where it's like a pursuit of peace, knowing that peace is going to be wanted. There's going to be an intentional tearing down of peace that's going to happen around you, and that we as Christians have to pursue that, because there's no like, hey, if something evil happens to you, I mean, that is implied, but it's more saying like evil is going to happen to you, you're going to experience these things, and then this is how you react to those in those situations. Then that's the pursuit. It's always a pursuit.
Right. Yeah, I think that's correct. So it's a positive, it's an active thing. It's not a passive So seeking peace. What do you think that might look like? Again, I'm not leading you anywhere here, Ryan. This is up to you.
No,
What do you think
okay.
it might look like? Can you think of examples of how we might pursue peace, seek peace, and pursue it? Or
Oh, do you want to use road rage as an example?
well, I'm just thinking in our everyday lives. I think. Well, go ahead. Did you have something in mind?
Yeah, I read something the other day, and I think this is where I struggle with it, or what this looks like, and maybe we can have this conversation. And it was basically that it was the comment that reconciliation requires two people, forgiveness requires one. Like I can forgive someone that does something bad to me, but reconciliation requires two of those. And so what does it look like? I think sometimes we think that seeking peace between two people is like, I have to keep pushing myself further and further and further and further when there's no reciprocation. And so I think that's the thing for me is like, what does it look like to pursue peace when there's nothing on the other side? When I think about reconciliation or something like that, when there is no reciprocity. Now, I understand God's calling us to do that even when it's not there, but even in a Christian community, what does that look like to be a peacemaker in that context? And so that's my question to you. Like how do we, what does that look like to pursue peace and because I think most of our listeners are involved in a community, and sometimes we kind of go like, I bet you we could all think, man, that was a situation where peace didn't happen, and we'd like this to feel better, but it seems like there's this. I don't know. It seems almost an easier concept for me when I think about it outside of the community, which is crazy, than inside the community.
Well, I'll give you a couple of examples, I think, and I like that. I like that phrase. I had never thought of it exactly that way. I'm glad you brought that up. The idea that we could, what is it? Is it Paul? As much as is possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace. Right, and so there's only a certain amount that we can do.
There's only so much. You're right. How far do you go?
But the pursuit part of it, I do think it's. And I want to be very careful here because I recognize that every situation is different and there's hurtful things that happen and this kind of thing. But in our culture, we are sometimes in our time, I'm saying in North American culture right now, we talk about cancel culture, right? And we can be very quick to want to cut someone off and say, well, I just want nothing to do with them. And again, I'm thinking of some specific situations in my life. I think pursuing peace means that we continue to try to have face-to-face conversations, to try to come to an understanding in those situations, rather than just saying, "Oh, I'm done. I'm just done with that person," and cutting them off. Again, I realize sometimes when there's harm done, we can forgive, but there comes a point where it's not, healthy for us as an individual. I just think we oftentimes make that almost an excuse and do it too quickly, right? Not always, but sometimes. And those are things you have to kind of think through and work through on your own. But this example just occurred to me. I had a front row seat to at least part of your early courtship with your wife, right? And
I have no idea where this is going. Just so everybody's listening, I have no idea what he's going to say here. Well, none.
I mean, my point is this: that initially, would you say that your lovely wife initially responded to you, reciprocated in the way that you were hoping that she would when you were first seeking her attention? Would you?
No, I was hardcore friend zoned.
Friend zone,
like almost to the point like there's no way I'm getting out of the friend zone. I mean, there was no way I was good.
So here's my point: you did not just passively sit back and stay in that situation, right? And here's why I was trying to carefully word that, because we will use the word pursue in that context, right? You pursued a relationship with your wife, and eventually over time.
I wore her down
after many tears.
Yeah, there were.
But you understand what I'm saying is we can understand pursuing a relationship in that context. But, we're talking here now among two people who where there's enmity. It's not just a matter of, well, you're a friend, but I don't think of you that way. But kind of take that same kind of idea of pursuing the kind of things that you did. You didn't give up. You continued to think about things that you knew she would like. You kept trying to spend time with her, right? Mm-hmm. There's a way in which I think pursuing peace with someone that we're at odds with have similar ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Going with that? Okay. It was just an illustration that occurred to me.
My wife will really appreciate that you brought this whole thing up.
Well, you guys have been married how many years now? Have two beautiful kids?
21 years.
So,
21.
look at how that worked, and you've got family.
She regularly reminds me that when I bring this story up that she friend zoned me. She's like, "We've been married for 21 years. What else do you need?"
We've been out of the friend zone at least 21 years, maybe 22.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, okay. Well, that's good to know. But anyway, I guess that's what I'm thinking about, this idea of pursuing, just as one example.
Like in those scenarios, I desired my wife in such a way that I would overcome obstacles or push beyond obstacles. But just as we kind of talked about, for that ever to come to fruition, she has to make the decision too. You know what I mean? But there's something where on my side, I kept pursuing that. Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't just a matter, well, I asked her out once and she said no. I guess that's just how it's going to be. So that's what I see pursuing. Now, I think there's other ways. Now, that's just one example. You're the one who brought in this idea of us being at odds with someone and pursuing peace. But I think we even need to actively make peace with those who we're not at odds with. And my point is we think about, okay, what is that person's needs, or how can I help reach out to that person and be a blessing to that person in the situation? How can I let this person know I'm thinking about them, or that I care about them? We often say that love is an active pursuit as well, right? When we talk about loving one another, that is shown often in actions. I just read this really good book for this class, and Nijay Gupta was the professor of the class, and he wrote this book called The Affections of Christ Jesus. We're hoping to get him on the podcast eventually, by the way. But he really makes an interesting point. He says we too quickly go to the action part of love, that it has to begin in an emotion, and then it demonstrates itself in an action. And I think it's similar with peace, something that we feel toward another person. We want a peaceful relationship, but then it requires action, pursuit, in order to bring that to fruition. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I do want to make one more point. I preached through Jeremiah this last fall, and I want to the passage I really want to look at is Jeremiah 29, but there's going to be a reference there to these other prophets. And I wanted to go back to Jeremiah chapter 23 to kind of give you some of the context of what's going on. Because Jeremiah, do you remember what's going on with Jeremiah?
He's preparing the people for captivity.
And basically God has said, you guys have tried my patience to the point that you're now going to be taken captive into Babylon, right? You escaped the Assyrians, right? You escaped these other times, but this time, because you have persistently refused to turn back to me, the die is cast. Now, the message of hope along with it is you're only going to be in Babylon for 70 years. I mean, only 70 lifetime. But the point is that I'm not cutting your people off forever, that I'm going to bring back. And this is where we start getting into this idea of a righteous remnant. There's going to be a remnant of people who are going to come back from Babylonian captivity, and God is going to use them in order to continue his ongoing plan. So this doesn't mean that there is no hope for humanity. That's the good news. There's still hope for humanity. But the point is that there were so Jeremiah, we call him the weeping prophet. I mean, how would you like that job? Your job, Jeremiah, is to go and tell people, there's no repentance left. You're going into Babylon, and this is what's going to happen.
He found himself in the bottom of a cistern at some point there, didn't he?
He did. There were lots. It was not a happy profession. But at the same time, then, interestingly, there were these other prophets who were preaching things that were not from God. And here's just one example. This is in Jeremiah 23, verse 16. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Do not listen to what the prophets are prophesying to you. They fill you with false hopes. They speak visions from their own minds, not from the mouth of the Lord. I find that an interesting idea. The visions they're having are from their heads, not from me. And basically it was this, the people wanted to believe that there was still hope, that the Babylonians were not going to defeat them. And the interesting thing is they had this example of the Assyrians, where the Assyrians had come right to their doorstep and God had miraculously rescued them, right? So these prophets were going around. Jeremiah was telling the truth, and these other prophets were going around telling the people what they wanted to hear. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anybody or not. But verse 17 says, they keep saying to those who despise me, the Lord says, you will have peace. And to all you who follow the stubbornness of their hearts, they say, no harm will come to you. But which of them has stood in the counsel of the Lord to see or hear his word? Who's listened and heard his word? Do you see what I'm saying? So they were preaching peace when Jeremiah was really saying, no, the time for our peace is gone. Babylon's going to come and is going to take us. So I wanted that background to get us to chapter 29, because in chapter 29, what Jeremiah is doing is he's telling the people, here's what we need to do when we enter into Babylonian captivity. When we're in Babylon, here's what we need to do. And listen to this. It's very interesting. It says, verse 7, also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I carry you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And so it's that idea, even this idea. I don't know what you're using the NIV too, aren't you?
Yeah, I can go to another translation though.
Well, you might, because it's interesting. Peace and prosperity is just the word shalom there. That's just one word. And the NIV translates it peace and prosperity. Look up the NRSV or something and just see what it says. But seek the peace and prosperity of the city, or seek the shalom of the city. And the city here, keep in mind, is Babylon, right? I want you to seek the peace of Babylon, to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it experiences peace, basically, you too will have peace. You too will have shalom. That's the word shalom that's used there in both those contexts. What does the NRSV say? Did you have it?
Welfare, for its welfare.
Okay. And it can have that context, but I just, in this, and that helps us understand the word shalom as well. I think this idea of peace in the Old Testament, it's well-being, right? It's the good things. But isn't it interesting? Now think about this. Jeremiah, God is telling Jeremiah to tell the people, when you get taken into captivity by these enemies, how would you feel toward the Babylonians if they
Not great.
Ransacked your city and taken you captive? He says, you're to seek their peace. So again, think about this in the context of 1 Peter, who's writing to the people who are in a Roman environment, and he's telling them, seek peace and pursue it. And Jesus is telling the people, be peacemakers, right? Because they are the ones who will be blessed, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. Let me finish this just real quick. Seek the peace of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it has peace, you too will have peace. I'm going to read it that way because of what we're talking about just now. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. And the whole point is this, that they're telling people, even when they're going to exile, it may not be long. God's going to take us back to the land. It's not going to be 70 years. That's the whole thing Jeremiah keeps saying. It's going to be 70 years, guys. And so what you need to do in the meantime is you need to seek the peace of the city in which you live. He goes on, he says, plant gardens, build houses, get married, have kids. In other words, you need to continue to live this life, even in a context of exile. Now,
This is a real like a Red Dawn situation, except they didn't fight back. You know what I mean? Like It's like Red Dawn. Patrick Swayze goes, "I'm not going to fight. I'm going to seek the prosperity of this place now." Anyway,
right. And here's my point. So we talked about this book by Kinnaman not too long ago. Well, I don't know how long it was. Kinnaman,
Faith for Exiles.
Right, Faith for Exiles, and he uses the term digital Babylon. We find ourselves in this virtual Babylon, and when you think of it in that way, when you think about enemies, the people that I'm going to use the scare quotes when we for those who are not watching this on YouTube, when we think about our enemies, right, or those who we disagree with on so many things. The message here, I think, is that we need to be peace pursuers. We need to be seek peacemakers on behalf of them as well, right? It's, Patrick Swayze may be a better example than you thought. That too many times we want to make things the way we want them to be. We want to, create them. And trust me, if I was in Babylonian exile, I'd be like, when can we go back to the land? I want to go back quickly. But God is saying the prophets who are telling you it's not going to be a long time are lying to you. And you may be in exile. And again, think about our situation, a long time. And the thing for you to do is to be peacemakers in the setting in which you find yourself. You need to be ones who are pursuing peace in your context, I think is the message that we find from the book of Jeremiah. So
is this a call to log off Facebook?
At least to use Facebook in a non how do I say this? In a non
caustic.
Well, let me make it positive, in a peacemaking kind of way, right? Can we, any of our communications, can we communicate with one another? I don't know. This is a legitimate question. Can we communicate with one another in a way that is peaceful, that brings shalom, right, for both us and for the one to whom we're speaking? I think it's a valid question. I think it's something for us to think about in our context. Are we seeking peace? Are we peacemakers? Anyway, spent a lot of time on that one. I know. I think it's also, as we think about division in our world. Yep.
I think it's and we've talked about this, the acceleration of these things that we call tools to communicate, but they also become dividing lines for us, and we speak in ways, and I think that's it, even what does it mean to pursue, but also, that pursuing peace, going back to that, what does that look like to pursue peace and communication in the way that we do it, that we know can have the opposite effect. So anyway, something to chew on, huh?
So I think it is what you're saying is correct. It's a tool. So the question is, how are we going to use it? Any of the things that we have at our disposal. Go ahead and read this last. This is the 8th. Now there is going to be some other things we have to talk about in verses 11 and 12, but this is verse 10, chapter 5, verse 10.
Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
So several things I want you to notice. Go back up and read this. I know it's been months ago now, so we might as well read that first beatitude again. Back up in chapter 5, verse 7. Read that one again. Or no, I'm sorry.
3.
Not 3. Thank you.
Yes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
So you see kind of an inclusio here, right? Because it says, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So again, both of these kind of, an inclusio kind of holds it together and shows us that this is all about what it means to be a person of the kingdom. This is what, if you want to inherit the kingdom of heaven, these are the kind of attributes that you need to have, both in terms of your relationship with God and then also in your relationship with one another. Now, here's an interesting one. So we've talked about being people who are pursuing peace, but then here's the idea that when we are persecuted, so this has to do with our attitude toward those who would seek to do evil toward us, right? To persecute us, pursue us in and it's very important here. Persecuted because of righteousness. This is a big thing that Peter talks about in his first letter. I won't quote it again, but you looked at 1 Peter 3 earlier. But Peter's point there is that if you are persecuted because you're doing the right thing, because of the things of God, then you're going to be blessed. The same way, and he uses the example of Jesus Christ. Jesus was doing the right things, right? He was following God's purpose, and he ultimately was persecuted. He was ultimately put to death. But Peter goes on to say, if you're persecuted because you're doing evil, then you're just getting what you deserve, right? If someone would seek to do evil because you're doing evil, then you're just getting what you deserve. But if you're persecuted for righteousness' sake, again, let's use Jesus' words here, then this is what it means to be a part of the kingdom of heaven. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven, is the idea. Comments or questions on that? Anything you wanna bring up?
No. Is there? Nah. I was going to say something, but is there any thought that there's some like chiasm here that's happening here in the Beatitudes? I mean,
go ahead. People will find chiasms everywhere.
Everywhere.
This is one of the places that there are people who've made the point that this is a chiasm or chiasm, that you could see it that way. Again,
that 6 and 7 are the. I was just thinking, as I was we were having this conversation, I was looking at 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. And then blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. So I didn't know if it was like pursuing God and pursuing mercy. Like I didn't know if that was like the center of. Yeah,
it certainly fits the idea of, again, loving God and loving people. So maybe. I find an easier time finding inclusios. I find that easier than I find chiasms, but it's possible. And then again, you would not be the first one ever to ask that question if there was a chiasm. The question you'd have to ask then is, does peacemaker and those who mourn, how does
what
that
are the
fit
parallels
together?
to it? Yeah. I was just trying to figure that out.
It's possible.
I was asking you. You're the, ask the scholar.
Well,
I'm just asking you.
Yeah. The word persecute, by the way, I use the word pursue as well. It's really the word dioko, which means pursue, and the idea is pursue and then do bad things to. So persecute has that kind of a connotation. Now, verses 11 and 12 are not an additional. And I'll show you why I think this is. There are some people who see this as part of the Beatitudes. This is an additional explanation of the last Beatitude, is the way that I would understand this, verses 11 to 12. And I'll show you why. Go ahead and read it. So again, just to remind you, 10, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then go ahead and read 11 and 12 for me, if you would, Ryan.
Yeah. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
So what I want you to notice is there's a shift here. And the shift is from the third person, blessed are those who are persecuted, to the second person, blessed are you when you're persecuted. So it's like, Jesus is giving us these Beatitudes. Here's what a characteristics of a citizen of the kingdom of heaven looks like. And then he turns to the people and basically says, you are blessed when these things happen to you, when you're in this category. Persecuted, falsely say all kinds of evil against you, insult you. Again, we think about Jesus as the example of that. But notice he also says, again, the same way he talked about righteousness, if you're persecuted for the sake of righteousness, here he says, if these things happen because of me. If in your being a follower of me, you receive these persecutions, then rejoice, because your reward in heaven is great. So this is an incredible and important promise for us. We've talked before about the fact, we like to think we're persecuted strongly in our culture, but there are cultures, there are brothers and sisters right now who are experiencing persecution. You've heard some of the news out from this year about places in Africa where it seems Christians are being targeted by certain groups that are seeking to do harm to them and persecute them. There are other places where persecution of Christians is a normal kind of experience. And so, so the promise here, and again, we see this in the later part of the New Testament. If you think about the book of Revelation, if you think about Peter, the trials that you're undergoing, even the book of James, all these books point to this reality of the situation of dealing with persecution and living through it. And here he says that your reward in heaven is great. He connects them to the prophets in the same way they persecuted the prophets who came before you. Now, we just talked about Jeremiah, right? And what are some other examples of prophets that you can think about being persecuted? You think of other examples?
I mean, all of them. I mean, in some way,
Isaiah certainly. Think about Elijah. Even if we go back into the narrative, not the writing prophets, but the earliest prophets that we see, Elijah, ran for his life from
Jezebel,
from Jezebel and Ahab. And so, they received persecution. Now, my question here is, why were they persecuted? Why were the prophets persecuted, would you say?
They
kind of just summarized.
They delivered a message that people didn't like to hear.
Okay, they were speaking the truth in a context where people didn't want to hear the truth. So, again, when we think about persecution, and again, we sometimes want to very quickly claim that. I think we need to make sure if we're being persecuted for the right reasons. We should not be persecuted because we're jerks, right? But if we are speaking truth, if we're bold with speaking the truth, and we're persecuted for that reason, then the promise here, I think, pertains to us that great is your reward in heaven. So that's the thing, and I do think I know for a fact there are places in the world right now where that's the case, and I think there are times where we find ourselves in that situation. Again, though, how do I say this? It's not our job. It's not our job to try to make sure that we're treated justly then. Our job is to speak truth. Our job, as we said earlier, is to pursue peace, even in those situations. Think about how many times do we see this? And again, later when we get further in the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to see this. But Paul, it's God. God is the one who's going to avenge. It's not our job. And in fact, quite the opposite. Even those who would persecute us, we are to do good to. We are to be kind to those who would speak evil against us. And so I think that's the message we need to take away. And that's not a very popular thing. Again, we tend to want to be more like I am when I have road rage. We want to be that way when we're treated poorly for our faith. And I think instead we need to think about having the attitude of Christ in the way that he responded to the persecution that he received.
Yeah, that's good. I think again, I'm in a Revelation class right now, and we're talking about the concepts of this and what is the message of Revelation of a people who are awaiting in a context. Like what is persecute? I think it's the question: what does persecution look like? Again, I think we have a very westernized view of, persecution. As we say, we want to say we're persecuted. And it's like, well, they're not making a decision I like when it's like, that there's like that there is. And again, persecution can come in a lot of different ways. It's not to say that there's no validity in that, but that there are people that are living in a context where it's not just, well, they're going to try to make a decision that I don't like. It's you, because of your witness, need to be removed from witness in those situations. And so what does it mean to live like that? And I mean, that's the book of Revelation. What does it mean to look like that? And also to know what God is doing, behind the scenes with all that.
To place ourselves in his hands is essentially what it is to trust him. And again, to be a part of his kingdom means we're seeking those things first. That's we're trusting in him before we trust in our ability to try to get back at those who would do evil to us, that kind of thing. So,
yeah. And that, Jesus says that's the reality of being a follower of his. Like persecution is the reality.
Yeah.
If you are living it out, if they did this to me, how much more will they do to you as we carry that on? So that's good.
You must take up your cross and follow me. Right. So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brian, thanks so much. This is great.
Yeah,
there's a lot to chew on here as we kind of think about living in our world today and living in the context of, and I think that's always the question of wisdom, praying for wisdom. Like how do we pursue wisdom? How do we pursue peace in this context? How do we pursue each other and God's will in this? And so that's always the prayer is wisdom to figure that all out. So.
Yeah, and we'll talk about next week or next time we're together. It'll be Salt of the Earth and City on a Hill. Again, these are very familiar passages to us, but I think there's deep wisdom here in the things that Jesus taught us. So
yeah. Well, Brian, I'm so glad we got back together here, and we'll be coming together here again soon. And thank you for those of us who have stuck with this. That even through the break, if you're back, we're so glad that you're back, and we're going to be trying to make room in our schedules for this in this season and keep pushing ahead. And again, we're going to try to do every other week here. I think for a little bit, if we've got the time, we'll go to every week. But just trying to figure that stuff out. And so really appreciate you coming along with us. If the BibleBistro.com is still available, if you'd like to go in there, we've got some resources on there and a bookstore where we get like pennies if you buy a book through Amazon on there. But we do appreciate it. Or you can support us on the BibleBistro.com. There's an option at the top that you can support us as well on a monthly basis. We appreciate it. All this stuff does take time and money for the resources to get it done, but we're so thankful to be back and thankful for everyone that's listened and send us in your questions or thoughts that you have. We'd love to hear from you.
We just heard from somebody today asking some questions about a earlier episode that they listened to. So it's always nice to hear from listeners. So
yeah. And if you're enjoying it, you can share. And we're also planning on some guests here coming up. We had Jason Staples on not too long ago and Matthew Bates, and those episodes seem to have really gotten some traction with people to start some thinking up there. So hopefully we'll continue. Keep pushing ahead with some special guests that we think you'll really like coming forward. So, Brian, thanks so much.
Right.
And I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Good to see you, man.
All right. See you, Brian. Bye.